I just got back from a trip across the country to watch a trial that lasted about 5 minutes. That's because in our country, we are eroding the trial system in America. In fact, it's a known thing in the legal profession. Attorneys, judges, all up and down the walk are saying we are losing this country's trial system. It is becoming more and more now that trials will settle or accept a plea and never go to trial. Let's talk about the latest trial that happened between Sabrina Adkins and Ben Feilds in London, Kentucky. I traveled all the way across the country to watch that trial that lasted no more than 5 minutes officially on the record. We're going to get into the details. The devil's in the details. Let's go. Now, I said it to Sabrina Adkins in the courtroom that day. I said it to her the night before indirectly. I've said it to many people, and I mean it. Sabrina Adkins needs to do what's best for her and her family. And so a large part of me expected a settlement in the case of Sabrina Adkins versus Ben Feilds. And if you're not real sure what that case is, let me break down for you a little bit of the details on that, because I want to use this as an example, not to criticize Sabrina Adkins. She took the option that was available to her. The problem is I feel like we need to work on removing this option, because this is the reason why, in my opinion, you saw, for example, in the case of Nikki Steins, maybe this is the reason why you saw a sheriff gun down a judge in the judge's chambers. Maybe it's the reason why you saw Luigi Mangione shoot a CEO of a healthcare company on the streets of New York, because people increasingly in this country may be having the feeling that our judicial system is failing us. And so people are starting to take it into their own hands. Now, I am not advocating any sort of vigilante justice, so make sure you understand that. When you look at the thumbnail, you're going to think, oh my God, this guy's going to say that we should go gun people down. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we can maybe understand why those things are happening when you look at the trend in America. And I'm going to use the recent trial of Sabrina Adkins versus Ben Feilds to accentuate this for you in full, without shaming Sabrina Adkins, because again, all Sabrina did was take advantage of the option that was in front of her, and she has every right to do so, and I do not fault her at all. Do not fault her. What I fault is our system. So let me explain my experience. Let me first explain Ben Feilds versus Sabrina Adkins. Ben Feilds was the deputy sheriff of Letcher County, Kentucky. Nikki Steins, who shot the sheriff, Kevin Mullins, in the judge's chamber, had been deposed in a trial of one of his deputies, Ben Feilds, previous to that shooting of the judge. And I said when it happened, that case with Ben Feilds and Sabrina Adkins informs why the judge was shot. It informs why Mickey Stein shot the judge. I'm nearly convinced of it, but I can't prove it yet. But we're working on that, and I think you're going to find the story very, very compelling. So, having said that, Nikki Steins was deposed in the case of Ben Feilds versus Sabrina Adkins. I don't want to bore you with all the details. If you've watched my videos, you already know. If you haven't watched my videos, that's how you get caught up on it. Watch the videos and see what I'm talking about. The summary of is that Ben Feilds, who was a deputy sheriff under Mickey Steins, was tried and convicted, and as allegations came against him from Sabrina Adkins, who filed a lawsuit saying that he had sodomized and raped her, coerced her, as actually the word, coerced her into sexual encounters in the judge's chambers because he held authority over her and could put her ass in jail if she didn't comply, and in fact had done so. She won a criminal lawsuit against Ben Feilds, and he was sentenced to 7 years, I believe, for multiple counts of rape and sodomy, of which I believe he served 6 months and was back on the street. Now came the civil case, which is the money part. Now that we know he did it because he's been convicted of it and actually spent time in jail for it. Now that we know he's done it, let's hold somebody accountable, like the sheriff's department that allowed it to happen. And so a lawsuit was brought by Sabrina Adkins in the civil case against the sheriff's department of Letcher County. And by the way, they were there in the courtroom when I was there. And Ben Feilds in both his individual and his professional capacity. So there's a lot of moving parts. Ben Feilds was there in his professional and his individual capacity, meaning him as a man for what he did, and also as his representative of the Letcher County Sheriff's Department. And also representative there was, I believe, Sheriff Billy Jones, I think is his name. He was there representing Letcher County, and a bevy of attorneys. And so I went across the country thinking this is going to be big. I've read depositions. I was prepared for it. But in the back of my mind, I said to myself, this more likely is going to plea. What's going to not plea? It's going to settle because they're going to try to buy Sabrina Adkins from telling her story. They don't want her getting on the trial. They are on the stand. They don't want her to get on the stand and tell her side of the story in more detail. And so therefore, I suspected that they would be making offers to her. And in fact, as I had boots on the ground and I was there awaiting trial the next day, the very night before trial, I was informed on good authority that many phone calls were taking place trying to make money offers to Sabrina Adkins to, for God's sake, take a dollar amount and let's not go to trial. Even though the jury had been summoned, the trial date had been set, they tried to move it and postpone it so they could work out a settlement, and the judge said, no, we're prepared to go to trial, go to trial. So on those conditions, I flew across the country to be there thinking, well, maybe this is going to happen. Maybe we're going to have an actual trial and more details are going to come out. And I was going to cover that footage for you every single day. Now, what happened the night before, like I said, is I had good authority that offers were coming in left and right, and I probably upping the number until they found a number that Sabrina Adkins would be willing to take so that she wouldn't go to trial. And let me say this one more time, if I haven't said it enough. Sabrina Adkins, there's nothing wrong with Sabrina Adkins doing what's right for her and her family. And if they got to a number that is life-changing for her and gives her some kind of peace that somebody was held accountable, then that's great. But the problem we have in America is that every time someone settles or does a plea deal, it robs America of the trial. So we don't get to know the details. And almost always a plea and or a settlement, whether you're talking about a criminal case with a plea deal or a civil case with a settlement, they end with stipulations that the details are not given to the public. So the public doesn't get to see the details. Now, sometimes individuals can go and tell their part of the story, but they have to be very, very careful because almost always in a settlement, deals are made on what can and can't be said. So as I was getting ready for the trial, I went to the federal courthouse in London, Kentucky, and I was ready to go. I actually sat in front of courtroom 4A on the 4th floor of the federal building courthouse, along with the attorney of Sabrina Adkins. We sat together waiting for the bailiff to open up the courthouse. When all was said and done, we opened up the courthouse. We watched all the attorneys come in. We watched Ben Feilds get seated. We watched Sabrina Adkins get seated. And there was attorneys representing both Ben Feilds and his individual and professional capacity and the sheriff's department. And he had a bevy of lawyers. And those two were sitting on the defense side of the courthouse. So there was two defendants, if you will, Ben Feilds in his individual and professional capacity. And then the Letcher County Sheriff's Department, represented by, I believe it was Sheriff Billy Jones. I think I got that name right. I should have double checked before we went there. And their bevy of attorneys. And that's when an attorney stood up on that side of the courtroom and said, Your Honor, yes, we're here for trial today, but I have been told we have reached a settlement in writing. And I haven't seen it yet. I've been told that it's in writing and it's done. I need time to review it. The judge said, look, downstairs, the jury is literally being summoned. They're going to come upstairs here in about 12 minutes. You've got 12 minutes to work out a deal. And I knew damn well it was going to happen. So for 12 minutes, there was secret talks. They went behind closed doors in the judge's chambers, and they came back, and the judge opened with saying, let's bring the jury up. We have reached a settlement. I'm going to thank the jurors for their time, which was fucking nothing. They did nothing. Now, to be fair, Judge Weir, I think is his name, it was a great flowery presentation about how they didn't waste their time. That because the jury was looming over the heads of the attorneys on both sides, they didn't want to run the risk of putting it in the hands of a jury. And so that's what forced a settlement at the last second. Somehow the jury was to take that as some kind of sort of solace, that they didn't waste their time coming to the courthouse that day because the fact that they were there and were ready to go to trial made these people agree to a settlement, of which the conditions are not revealed to the public, and the trial will never be relieved to the public. And ultimately, the defendant doesn't have to plead guilty to anything, doesn't have to admit wrongdoing. Most of the time when those settlements happen, it's like, I'm not admitting I did anything wrong. I'm not admitting I did anything wrong. I'm just admitting that I don't want to go to court and I could lose even though I didn't do anything wrong. So I'm willing to pay some money to just make this go away because I could run a risk of losing even though I didn't do anything wrong. And so it's a way for them to save face. They don't have to put on there that they've been convicted of it. They don't have to list any of that because it was a settlement. It was agreement. I didn't do anything wrong, but I'm going to give you some money anyways just to make everything go away. And so as I watched that deal broker, as I saw the jury be dismissed and thanked for their times of service, I felt that we in America had gotten robbed again. And I started to look up the statistics, and I want to show this on screen for you just real quickly. And again, this is not a knock to Sabrina Adkins. Sabrina did exactly what she needed to do for her family and her life. But the decline of trials is known in legal services. I'll put myself on screen down at the bottom. Is known in the legal community as the vanishing trial system. Back in the 1800s, trials were common. It is the most common way. It was what we believed in as a country, was trial by your peers, a trial by a jury. By the 1960s, only about 10 to 12% of trials actually ended going to a jury. They ended up getting deals before that. By the 1990s, it became disgusting. It was 5 to 6% of all trials, criminal or civil, would end up not going before a jury because it became more and more commonplace for criminal cases to plea and not go to trial, or for civil cases to settle and not go to trial. And by today, only 1 to 3% of all cases that go into a courtroom system ever actually make it in front of a jury. 1 to 3%, because this is what happens every single time. So you have a Bryan Kohberger pleading guilty, and you get everybody in America having no facts about what happened because there was no trial, no jury got to see it, and yet, well, he must be guilty. He pled guilty. Also in a settlement, something must have happened because they paid money, but we don't get to see it. Nobody gets to see it. Nobody gets to talk about it. And technically, in a settlement case, they can go away saying, I didn't do anything wrong. I just paid to make sure we didn't run the risk of getting found wrong for something we didn't do. Now, to further a few thoughts on this, I want to talk about the media. The media, this should have been a major event. The whole Sabrina Adkins versus Ben Feilds and the lawsuit and the things that it was going to bring out. And yet, no media was there, to my knowledge. I did hear a rumor that somebody from the media showed up, but really there was about 3 of us in the courtroom that were related to the case in some way. And then there was nothing. There was no media. I was the only media there. And I thought to myself, where's the effing media? Why would media show up? Why would media show up? I think we're starting to realize in this country that most trials end in a settlement, especially civil trials. So when a civil trial where money's on the line, there's no reason for the media to show up because there's nothing to cover. Because usually in a settlement, the parties agree not to disclose the particulars of that settlement. So there's nothing to interview. There's nothing to talk about, with maybe just a face shot of somebody. And in Sabrina Adkins' case, in Sabrina Adkins' case, unfortunately, she wasn't a big enough celebrity for them to give a shit. So nobody showed up. This is sad. This should have been a monumental case. It should inform, and it does inform, the Mickey Stein's case. And yet the details are never going to be entirely out there. Although I'm going to do my best at the Devil's Advocates to tell you that story, because I've been told Sabrina Adkins has not been given a non-disclosure agreement and can talk about things. So I'm going to do my best to get that story and work with her if we can. Well, we'll see what we can do with that. But the point being is that this should be a wake-up call to America. Lawyers and judges alike have been complaining that the trial system in the United States is eroding. Everything is designed, the system is designed to not go to trial. The system is designed on the criminal side to overcharge and get people to plead to things so that they avoid some ridiculous possible risk of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or death, for example. And so they're encouraged to plea for something less by overcharging. And in the civil case, they're encouraged to settle for an undisclosed amount and not admit any wrongdoing so they can go on with their lives and continue to do maybe what they've done their whole time, because there's no guilt. They just paid off the ability to have it go away. And that is eroding the system. Now let's talk a little bit about what I said with the whole Nikki Stein shooting the judge or Luigi Mangione shooting a CEO. Has it gotten into Americans' consciousness that nothing gets done in the court systems? The courts have failed us. The judicial system has failed us. The legislative process has failed us. It doesn't do any good to pass laws, to elect new senators or new congressmen or new governors for that matter. Nothing ever changes. The system is inherently broken. So do some people end up just picking up a gun and settling it themselves? And while I, again, have to reiterate, I do not believe in vigilante justice, you almost have to believe that is the direct result, of a trial system that is completely eroded in America. I'm adding to a list of things that I consider broken in America, and one of the things are the vanishing trial system. Please, America, start to complain about the lack of trials in America, the lack of transparency. More and more laws as we speak, like in the Idaho 4 case, are being passed to keep the public unaware of what's happening. Trials take place in secret. I should say negotiations take place in secret. Deals get made in secret. The public's never allowed to know. Law enforcement never has to show their work and can just get a conviction or a settlement, and nobody gets to know what the particulars were. That is a scary, scary world we live in. We damn near have no trial system in America left. Only about 1 to 3% of trials, criminal or civil, ever go to trial. That should bother you. Wake up.